Good morning and welcome everybody to this meeting of the local review body of the 4th of February. I can confirm the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Firstly, can I ask members to appoint a chairman for this meeting? Yeah, no.
Nominate Davey.
Thank you.
Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this local review body, Thursday, 4th of February. Got apologies, I take it from Councillor Maitland, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman.
Okay. I got to ask for declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Oh, thank goodness for that. You want to take us through the, please, Claire?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm we have two notices of review for consideration at this meeting. The first being item 4, Oakville, Maxwelltown Station Road, Dumfries, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house and formation of access, 15P 30137. In your papers you have the notice of review, report on handling, observations of the appointed officer and the applicant's agent, with the planning application form, decision notice, relevant extracts from the local plan, and you have the photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal are on page 76 to 77, being that the proposal is contrary to policy OP2 of the local development plan and supplementary guidance on design quality of new development, in that the proposed dwelling house, by virtue of its comparatively constrained size and shape, would result in an unacceptable increase in density on a prominent site in the street scene to the visual detriment of the locality, such that it would fail to relate well to the established low density character and appearance of the locality, or be sympathetic to the local built form or surrounding pattern of development. You have the requested method of determination on page 8, being that the applicant has requested that the review be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the reviewed documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notices of review are, in summary, the submitted location plan marked up with the distances of frontages to dwellings shows that the 764 metre squared is comparable in size to dwelling house curtilages located on the east side of Maxwelltown Station Road, which range from 230 metres squared to 1680 metres squared. The denser east side has a great variation in plot size and shape. These existing older properties have a far greater density than the larger newer properties located to the west, which are low density modern housing. And 3, the density of the indicative property for the application site is comparable with both Oakville and Refusal Lodge. And 4, the dwelling on this site in the region of 100 to 120 metres squared is appropriate for this location. Other matters of detail are to be addressed later. Sensitive design outcome could be provided appropriate to its prominent location. You'll also have the further comments by interested parties, being the comments of the road planning team leader, comments of the appointed officer, and comments of the applicant's agent. You also have copies of all the relevant development plan policies, being Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, OP1, OP2, H1, IN7 and IN9. Other material planning considerations would include the Scottish planning policy and supplementary guidance, design quality of new development. So the main issues that the local review body may wish to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies, particularly policy OP2 of the local development plan and supplementary guidance on design quality on new development? Would a dwelling house on the site result in an unacceptable increase in density to the visual detriment of the locality? Would a dwelling house on the site fail to relate well to the character and appearance of the locality? Would a dwelling house on the site be sympathetic to the local built form? Would the dwelling house on the site be sympathetic to the surrounding pattern of development? And are there any other material considerations of sufficient weight which would indicate that a decision should be taken other than one in accordance with the terms of the development plan? So, having outlined the documents within the members' papers, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It is confirmed that no representation from any party will be heard today. The options available to the local review body for this and the following case today are that it can decide it has sufficient information for it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations. The LRB would have to state precisely what information it was seeking and who would provide it, resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak and on what matters, or resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied. This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. And if the local review body resolves it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice would include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority had decided the case reviewed. We have a planning advisor present today. He is here to assist in both items. It's confirmed he has not had any involvement in either case and was not the case officer or the appointed officer for either application. He is here purely to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or process of the local review body. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I'll ask the chairman to now delete the debate and in the first instance delete the local review body through the agenda papers today, and just so they can decide together if they have sufficient information to make the determination today.
Right, thanks very much, Claire. I think we maybe have a quick discussion later on about whether that's necessary, but well, anyway. We'll go to item 4, notice of review, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house and formation of access at Oakville, Maxwelltown Station Road, Dumfries. Planning reference number 15/B/3/0137. Would you like to take us through the photograph, please, Robert?
Chair, I'm quite happy to do that at this point in time. Just for the advice of the local review body members, these replicate the photographs as they appear in the papers on pages 147 to 152, but obviously they're going to be on the screen and in colour. So running through these, first picture is a view towards the application site and Oakville. So this is from Maxwelltown Station Road itself. You might find the 1:1250 scale location plan on page 65 of the papers a useful kind of reference point to see the various features here. So you've got the application site in the middle ground and Oakville in behind it. So this is looking broadly in a kind of northeasterly direction. This is a view again of the application site. The application site tapers towards the south, so this is looking in a southerly direction down Maxwelltown Station Road. It's along the site of the old railway line, which is now a kind of footpath stroke cycle path. This is closer to the application site, right on the edge of it, looking south from the northern boundary with Oakville. So where you see that kind of boundary line, the fence in the foreground, that's the northern boundary with Oakville itself, and that's looking towards the south. You can see Maxwelltown Station Road on the right-hand side and the former railway embankment in the distance there. This is a neighbouring dwelling. It's Fortisset Lodge, which, if you look at your map, is opposite the application site. Again, it's on Maxwelltown Station Road. Another neighbouring dwelling, this is Dalmalin to the northeast of the application site. And again, I think you can see that on the plan on page 65. I'll just double check that just now for the avoidance of doubt. Yes, it's the smaller property just to, it's actually more like to the northwest of the application site when you look at it on that plan, on the opposite side of the road. Oakville and Stymai, these are to the north of the actual application site. So kind of north-northeast, Oakville first and then Stymai. And then you've got neighbouring dwellings to the north on the opposite side of Maxwelltown Station Road. So again, it's a view of the application site. This is looking from the north along Maxwelltown Station Road. So you can see the application site in the middle distance there on the left-hand side. And a view just from the end point of the site, looking from the south towards the north. So you can see Oakville sitting there in the distance. And that's within the site itself, looking towards Oakville again. So it gives you an idea of the characteristics of the site and its broadly triangular shape. This is showing the position of the proposed access onto Maxwelltown Station Road itself. You'll notice on page 67 of the papers there's an indicative site layout. So that's giving a reference to that. So you can see the lay-by, and there's an annotation there showing a setback of 5 metres from curb line. So that's the proposed access point, and this is just showing the photograph of that. It's also showing the drop in levels from the level of the road. You can see the car there that's parked up and the prevailing level within the site. So there is a drop in levels from that road level.
Thank you, Robert. Right, we'll just go through a section at a time, and if you have any questions in that section, just ask away. Item 1, the notice of review. Section 2, a report on handling. Notice from page 23 onwards, there's exchange of views between officers and the applicant's agent. Nothing in that section. Section 3, observation of the appointed officer on the application agent's notice of review, page 51 onwards. The planning application form dated April 2015, plans and supporting information submitted, page 55 onwards. Yes, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. It's just actually on page 53 in the observations of the appointed officer. This is the title there on the top of that page gives it refusal of planning permission for erection of dwelling house. Now, I've been looking at this as a refusal of planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house, and I think that's quite a significant difference when we're going to be considering this. So it's just to really clarify, is it a planning permission in principle, or is it planning permission for erection of a dwelling house? So that would be the clarify for the top of page 53.
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to clarify that is the case. The decision notice on page 76 to 77 does clarify it's a refusal of planning permission in principle. Unfortunately, I do accept that that heading in the appointed officer comments is not helpful, because it does say it's refusal of planning permission rather than making it clear that it's refusal of planning permission in principle. But just to clarify, it is refusal of planning permission in principle.
Microphone on. Planning application form dated 10th of April 2015. Plans and supporting information submitted. Page 73. Decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 28th of August 2015. The relevant text starts from Dumfries and Galloway local development plan. Right, Stephen?
Thank you. And this touches again on the planning permission in principle or planning permission, but can a planning permission in principle be contrary to OP2 in the sense that we're not actually considering a specific? I mean, it's interesting in the original report it mentions, is it H1B, in terms of the site could be considered as a place that a development could take place, but this is almost like assuming that we're looking at an actual application rather than a permission in principle. So it's really just, are we clear that we're considering the planning permission in principle against the appropriate policy, if you like?
What page are you on, Stephen?
I beg your pardon. It's just actually the reason for refusal on page 76.
75 is the refusal application for planning permission in principle. Right, that's clear there, certainly. Yes, it still says refusing planning permission in principle on page 76 as well.
Sorry, Chair. I think what I'm trying to get at is if you're considering a plan application in principle, how much weight or significance can we really attach to whether or not a planning permission in principle would fit in with the context? Because we're not actually looking at an actual design, so we don't yet know whether or not it would relate well or not to the density or character of the existing buildings.
I think we're talking about the area and how a house of similar design to what's round about would fit into that area. But I'll bring Robert down in a minute. Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. It's basically on the same point that what we're talking about today is planning an application for in principle. So therefore, anything that we have before us in terms of drawings, etc., is purely indicative or illustrative. It's not, it's not binding in any way. And the question, as far as I would like to put, Chair, is that if, and I stress if, because I have not come to a conclusion one way or another, but if we were to reverse the decision of case officer, and to grant this in principle, what would thereupon happen, as I understand it, is that a detailed application would require to be submitted thereafter. And presumably, if in fact that detailed application were incapable of meeting the grounds of policy OP2, presumably, Chair, that would be refused at that time. Would I be correct? Through you to Mr. Duncan, would I be correct in saying that is the case?
Robert, you want to comment?
Quite happy to comment on both of these points. I mean, in terms of the LDP policy OP2, that's obviously the key policy that's been quoted in the decision notice, along with the supplementary guidance, design quality, new development. Now, looking at the appointed officer's comments, particularly points 5 and 6, and these appear on page 54 of the papers, it's the paragraphs 5 and 6 that give definition to the reason and the means in which policy OP2 has been used. Now, I'm not here to advocate the comments that have been made by the appointed officer. I'm the independent planning advisor. I can only simply advise that that's the appointed officer's take on the use of policy OP2 and the reasoning why policy OP2 has been used. As point 6, I think, really, it says the proposed higher density of the proposal on a constrained site in both size and shape in comparison to its surroundings is not in keeping with the established spacious low-density layout of the adjoining dwellings and wider Maxwelltown Station Road area. It was therefore concluded that the development did not relate well to the density, character and appearance of the surrounding area and was not sympathetic to the local built form, which is contrary to the requirements of LDP policy OP2. It's obviously an application for planning permission in principle, so you're not assessing design quality in the sense that you've got something tangible there, a built form, if you like, with known materials and such like to weigh up against what's there. It's the concept of building a house on a piece of land that you're looking at here. You know, is that suitable for, is a house acceptable in principle at this location? So those were the kind of considerations that were taken into account. It was imagining, if you like, the way I'm reading that is they were thinking ahead to see what could be accommodated there and does that fit with those characteristics in that area. So it's that use of OP2, I think, informed the decision, looking at the appointed officer comments. With planning permission in principle, if you grant that for a use of land, in this case for a dwelling house, you establish the principle of that use on that land. It is then, the onus is then on the applicant to come forward with a detailed design that is acceptable both in terms of area, mass, scale, height, design, finishes, details of access, drainage, so on and so forth. Something detailed that would then be found to be either acceptable or not on its own merits within that site. So you might say, well, the principle of that use on that land is okay, but then you find you either get something in detail that you find is acceptable or unacceptable, but that then gets determined on its own merits. Having said that, I think it is legitimate to look at it at the principal stage and try and imagine, is it really going to be feasible as a site for residential development? You've got to really test the feasibility of a site at the outset rather than just grant something in principle and then just hope for the best and hope some detailed design is going to come in out of the sky that will resolve issues that are obviously there from the outset. Don't know if that helps or not. I'm happy to give any further advice.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Alistair, you want to come back in? You quite happy with that response? Stephen, you okay? Right, thank you. We're on the local development plan. There's nothing in that. Page 145 onwards, voters' application. And the locality. Councillor Geddes?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. It may be in the report, and I may in fact have overlooked it, but any indication sort of the size of Dalmalin or Dalmalin We have a tentative size, as it were, or an illustrative size for what's being proposed on the site in front of us. Dalmalin, or Dalmalin, or however you pronounce it, is obviously significantly smaller than Fortisset Lodge. And I wondered if there's any indication of just exactly what sort of area we're talking about there.
Do you have anything on that, Robert, at all? Size it?
I'm just looking through the papers. I'm sure the applicant did an exercise on this and looked at the densities of the various properties. I can come back to you in a minute. I'll look through the papers and come back to you. I'm sure there is something there.
Page 71, there's got a lot of measurements there. Councillor Geddes?
You know, the risk of interrupting Mr. Duncan while he's looking through the papers, but would it be fair to say, sir, that, you know, the application we have before us today is the latest in a line of previous applications to subdivide bigger plots in this part of Dumfries? Would that be a fair comment to make?
I think actually when you look at the site, it's the last piece of land that's there, and they're trying to identify a use for it rather than converting it into garden use. I think that's about the size of it, and just be it or wasteland. I think that's about the size of it, after it, to be honest. Do you want to comment on that, Robert?
I don't really know the planning background to the site in that much detail, no.
Thanks, Chair.
I think the applicant's agent certainly argue that they could fit in a house of that size, but I think that the surroundings are so narrow. It's all right, that size in a square might be more acceptable than in a triangle. I think that's really the issue as far as I could see it. Councillor McCoughtry?
Yeah, I think if you know that area, that page 71, where it's got the observations and the site areas, you've got to bear in mind that if you go at the beginning of the site, you're back to houses that were built a way back in the tail end of the 19th century. So they're not all of a sameness, if you like. The age variety of the houses there. I think you'll know that area as well, Jock. You've got the very old sort of sandstone buildings right up at the top. And then it's all the newer ones as you come further and further down the site.
That's right. I think the light industrial unit, actually, if you take to the Tregells Road, down to the light industrial unit, which is a garage, that's the old buildings. But below that is the new properties that's been developed. And well, the other side of Maxwelltown Station Road, the new buildings are built opposite the older buildings. But on the left-hand side, as you go down, the new buildings start after the light industrial unit. I don't think there's anything in the paper indicating the size of that Dunmalin at all. But I think probably the argument there is that size of house would fit into the triangle, but it's closer to the edges. I think that's the big issue as far as I could see.
Thanks, Chair.
Right. Do you consider that you've got sufficient information to make a decision?
I would say we have, sir, and sufficient information to make a decision today. I don't think we need a site visit or any further submission.
Councillor Thompson, quite happy. Councillor McCoughtry? Thank you. Members MD, any comments they want to make or questions they want to ask? Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, thank you. Would it be possible, I'm just trying to get, there's a couple of things stand out to me anyway, which is 4.4 on page 16, which is in the report, just talking around, or acknowledging that this site would, the principle of development as an infill or windfall site for housing would generally comply with policy H1B. And that seems to be taken as a, yeah. And then 4.5, on the next page, provided the development would comply with all other development plan policies, etc., the principle of development is acceptable. So taking that as the basis of the site, you know, that's sort of acknowledged there. Now, obviously then the consideration would be, well, if a development comes forward, could it be considered against OP2? And obviously from your answer you gave before, you're suggesting that there was an element of trying to maybe think ahead a wee bit, just to sort of see what would be a sensible way forward. But when you're showing the pictures there of Fortisat, Oakville and whatever, would it be possible to go back? I'm just trying to get a sense of the character and appearance of the locality. So if we looked at, like say, is it Fortisat? Okay, so I'm looking at that, and then there's the next one of, is it Dalmalin, I beg your pardon, okay. And I'm trying to see a sort of commonality of look and appearance and character there. And then if you show the next one of Oakville, now to me, I don't see a family resemblance or a character immediately apparent there. Maybe that's just me, but standing that against what it says in 4.4, that the principle of development against H1B is kind of accepted in the report. I'm struggling to square the two views, but that's just, I'm totally open to other members' comments, but given that it's planning permission in principle, you know, that's what I'm trying to sort of get a sense of in terms of the body as a whole, the local review body. But I'll defer to other members. That's just my thoughts just now.
Well, I think those photographs show a lot of the layout on Maxwelltown Station Road, where the large houses and large pieces of land, albeit Dalmalin has been fitted in, been shoehorned in at the other side of the road, which being a square piece of land, I think it looks as if it's got more space round about it. But the area of land we're talking about here is a triangular piece, and albeit the space measures the same, with it being triangular, it has restricted width, but as the house is built down towards the pointed end, if you like. And I think that it makes it look as if it's just been shoehorned in type of thing. That's my view of it anyway, Stephen. And kind of have a bit of knowledge of the area. And that's the big difference, I would suggest, in layout with the rest of the estate. Although they mention houses that built when cottages used to be built on the side of the road, and there were small holdings in that area. Well, you'd also a station in there as well, and you've got the cycle route over the back of there. So to me, it's a totally different development. Try to put in that small triangular area of land, albeit they're saying the space is as another house is maybe in, but it being square looks better than it does being triangular. That's the view I've got of it. Any more questions? Can we make a decision? Stephen.
Thanks. I mean, I can't get away from the fact that it's planning permission in principle, and I feel that my interpretation of OP2 is that really there's not that much that we can interpret against OP2 apart from the foresight of the case officer. I think it establishes in the report that it is a suitable site for development, but we don't yet know what exact nature of development will come forward for housing, I should say. And I think it would be, I would find it difficult to not accept it in principle. You know, there's a site there. Otherwise, we're saying basically we can't do anything with that, which I don't think is in the spirit of promoting development where possible. So I would go against what's recommended there and allow planning permission in principle with the appropriate, you know.
But the only thing I would draw your attention to page 67, and there's a kind of layout there of a house in that site. Now, when you look at it as written in relation to the other two houses that's shown there, that's the sort of issues I was trying to highlight here.
Thanks, Chair. But going back to the point I raised earlier with Mr. Duncan, I mean, even if the body today were to accept what's been suggested and to say that in principle we feel that this site is capable of appropriate future development, what would thereupon happen, as I understand it, is that a detailed application would be submitted, and presumably if that detailed application at that time could not meet the relevant criteria, in the case officer's view, anyway, could not meet the relevant criteria, it would be competent, as it were, for the for that application, the detailed application, to be refused.
Chair, for the avoidance of doubt, that's correct. And also, just to clarify, the drawing on page 67 has been submitted as an indicative site layout, so it's not binding on whatever decision you make today. You know, as a review body, you're free to review the officer's decision, take whatever decision you feel is appropriate in reviewing that decision, whatever grounds you feel appropriate. But if you're minded to grant permission in principle, it would be on the basis that there would require to be a further application before development could actually take place on that site, and that in itself would be the subject of assessment and would have to be appropriate against the relevant policy.
Can I say that I must admit that's the position that I'm sort of coming towards, Chair. But and making the point, I do appreciate that at the end of the day, if you grant an application in principle today and the applicant proceeds, there'll be an awful lot of money. I know it's not a planning consideration, but there'll be an awful lot of money, as it were, incurred in producing proper architect's drawings, and all the rest of it, as it were, to ensure, in fact, that there was something of sufficient detail which would form the basis of a detailed application. So I'm not doing this in a cavalier fashion, Chair, because, as I say, the last thing I would want to see would be we grant permission in principle today, and de facto it becomes clear, at the detailed application stage that, with the best will in the world, and it's really going to be difficult, if not well nigh impossible, as it were, to get something which at that stage would be acceptable, because that would take up time, energy, and as I say, probably significant expense as well. So that's the horns of the dilemma as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm basically sympathetic to the point that Stephen's making, but as I say, if we go down that route, I don't like the impression that perhaps maybe it might be that we're leaving it, as it were, we're if not quite doing a Pontius Pilate and washing our hands of it, at least we're leaving it to other people, to sort of come to the decision. In a detailed basis. I'm not probably articulating that very well, but that's the horns of the dilemma that I find myself in, sir. Basically, I'm in sympathy with what Stephen's saying, but I have a wee bit concern on that whether or not at detailed stage we could really get anything which would prove to be acceptable to professional planners on whose guidance and judgment we rely. We don't always agree with, but whose guidance and judgment we're obliged to rely. And that's where I am at this moment.
I think I could tend to agree with you, Professor. I think if that had been a square piece of land, it would be a totally different thing. But whether, as you say, whether they can design something to fit into there which would suit the rest of the area. Councillor McCoffrey.
I'm happy to uphold the planner's decision. I mean, I can see what the owner is trying to do, sell off a bit of their garden ground Now, whether they'd actually ever process another application's another matter. They may well sell it with permission in principle and wash their hands of it. So it's somebody else's worry. And I'm well aware that that area there, although some of it was in the local plan many years ago, a bit like Topsy, it's just growing and growing. And I think there's other instances within that actual development, not on that side of the road, but on the other side of the road, where large gardens have been subdivided. I think you can see that in one of the photographs. There's a much smaller property in between the larger properties. And it's been the same sort of thing. Planners have said, no, this was not what the original design for Maxwelltown Station Road was. It was all small holdings, as I remember initially. Quite a number of small holdings there with paddocks. They've just gradually been subdivided over the years. Certainly not in the spirit of what was envisaged for being out that way, because it connects up with the other road, which again still has paddocks. Now, in this case, I'm quite happy to uphold the decision of the planner.
I noticed on that layout on page 67 it talks about new screen planting, but I've got doubts about whether that area was ever used as garden area at all, was it ever maintained. So I don't know, but I appreciate where you are, Councillor Geddes, and we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, I think. That there's the layout there. If we grant permission, then they can't find something to fit it. They spent a lot of money.
Let me say for the record, Chair, I'm no whinger about being between the rock and the hard place. You know, if you volunteer, you know, you have no complaints. But as I say, it is a tricky one. I find it a tricky one anyway.
Thompson?
Thanks again. I think there's a lot of washing of hands going on, potentially, depending on what we decide today. We can either wash our hands today and say, actually, you couldn't develop anything on here. It's a planning permission in principle. So we either wash our hands here and say, basically, that this site's out of action, or we pass it on to potentially a planning committee, who then may have to say, well, actually, no design's ever going to fit that site. So do we want to wash our hands today, or wash our hands at a future meeting of the planning committee?
Well, that's right, and I think as Councillor Geddes says, it's going to be the cost to the applicant to get a design that might be suitable, or there again might not be suitable. That's the difficulty that they're going to have, and it's whether we just say to them, look, we don't believe you can fit a house into that area. Robert, you want to comment?
Chair, it was only an observation that the applicant chose to make the application for planning permission in principle. Nobody forced them to do that. They could have equally made a detailed application for full planning permission, showing a fully worked up design and finish of house within the land, but they chose not to do so for whatever reason. So this is the application they've chosen to make, presumably in the hope that they would get a positive outcome to it. And there's always inherent uncertainty with that, and they would have known that when they made the application.
Maybe just what's known as testing the water. So Councillor McCoskey's moved the motion. Yet anybody otherwise minded? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I don't think it should be upheld. I think that planning permission principles should be granted in the understanding that, you know, a subsequent application can come forward and be assessed against policy as per usual. So I think it should be. I would amend that.
Councillor Geddes, you want to comment?
Well, if Councillor Thompson, you know, is prepared to articulate valid, and that's not meant to sound, that's not meant to be disrespectful to him, prepared to articulate valid and sustainable planning reasons as to why, in fact, we should overturn the previous decision to refuse, I'll second that.
Councillor Thompson.
Okay, thanks for that tacit support there. I think what I'm trying to get at is I think that the interpretation of assessing the application against OP2, I don't think carries sufficient weight to go against considering the site against H1B, which I think establishes that the site can quite reasonably, in principle, support the development of a house. And I don't feel that in my interpretation anyway, that complying with the requirements of policy OP2, I don't feel yet that it needs to, because there's nothing there to consider against OP2. In my view, I don't know if that could be made or sort of phrased in a way that would make it competent, but just the reason for refusal I don't feel stands sufficiently, because there's nothing there to consider against OP2. What we're looking at is planning permission in principle on a site which has already been established in the report, or argued in the report, would be suitable for a development of a dwelling house.
The only thing, you put me in a difficult position. The only thing I'd say, there's a power pole there with a transformer on it. What would the situation there would be? That would need to be moved somewhere, Robert. Is that the case?
I don't think that would necessarily be the case, Chair. I mean, again, one of the difficulties within this case is lacking the definition of what they would intend to build within the site, and where it would go, you know, where would any dwelling house or associated outbuildings go. I don't think the indicative layout that's been presented would actually affect that power line, and if it did, it would just be a case of getting agreement with Scottish Power to move it or redirect the kind of supporting lines that you've got there for the pole.
Well, I think given we've got, I was more inclined towards Tom, but there's no point in going down that road because it gave me 2 votes. We'll go down the road of Councillors Geddes and Thompson and put it back into the ball back into their court if they want to come back with something and get spend the money and get a development. Is that satisfactory to everybody? Okay, we overturn the decision of the officers. Clear?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm the local review body reversed the decision of the appointed officer and agreed to grant planning permission in principle, reasons being they've noted that the application conforms with, or largely conforms with, policy H1B, and that a further application would be required, and this would need to conform to the relevant policy.
Right, thank you very much. Can we move to page 153, item 5, notice of review. Refusal of planning permission for installation of 6 replacement windows and the external door in the front elevation of a dwelling house at 12 Agnew Crescent, Stranraer. Planning reference 15/P/1/0180. Robert, you want to take us through the photographs, please?
Yep, quite happy to do so, Chair. As per previous photos, these are replicas of the ones that appear in the papers. In this case, it's pictures that appear in pages 223 and 224. There's only a couple. This is a view of the existing windows and door in the front elevation of the property on Agnew Crescent. And the second one is just a closer view of the existing door to that property. That's all we had on file.
That window that was covered to a certain extent by the car is a plastic window, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll just go through the papers. As is, page 159 onwards. Of review. Page 165 onwards, report on handling. Page 175, observation of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review. Okay. Page 179, planning application form, plans and supported information submitted. Page 199, decision letter from the council dated 29th October 2015. Relevant extracts for Dumfries and Galloway local plan. And photo. Got a comment? No, no yet. Photos up, application site and the locality. Okay, do you consider that you have sufficient information in these papers to make a decision? Okay, thank you very much. Right, take any comments and questions. Councillor Geddes?
Are we in debate, to use the phraseology, sir?
Yes, we're not getting into anything else.
Yeah, well,
For fear of getting diverted.
as far as I'm concerned, Chair, you know, cutting to the chase, I would be of the view that we should uphold this decision because, quite frankly, you know, there's been a clear steer given. I think the report's a helpful report. And there's been a clear steer given that the council, as planning authority, in appropriate circumstances, will accept a particular type of UPVC windows, and that to me is commendable. It shows that, you know, we're moving with the times, and that you know, if you're talking about, you know, sort of energy effective houses or energy efficient housing and all the rest of it, that's the sort of thing that you've got to do. And I think, to be fair, we seem to have a well settled policy along these lines. Indeed, as the report says, the applicant, I think, has previously benefited from the implementation of that policy elsewhere. And my view, Chair, is that in the and I'm not trying to belittle the comments which appear to have been made on behalf of the applicant, but if reading my understanding of the report is correct, the issue of the type of windows in question that the applicant is seeking would be to facilitate, as it were, taking furniture in and out of the property. I think I read that in the report. And I would have to say that I find that, with the greatest respect, a somewhat bizarre reason. I mean, I know some of the houses in that part of Stranraer, and yes, I wouldn't like to, you know, humph, for want of a better term, furniture upstairs and downstairs, but, you know, taken against the context of an application for planning consent, I don't really think at the end of the day that's a valid and sustainable reason. And as I say, having given consideration to it and walked past it, albeit, you know, sort of surreptitiously recently, Chair, as far as I'm concerned, I think that the case officer has got this right and the determination which has been made, and I would be prepared to support the finding in that regard.
Thanks, Alistair. Councillor Thompson?
It's just for a wee bit of clarity. See on page 178, it's actually in the notice of the decision effectively, but it talks about the applicant having benefited from planning permission elsewhere. Now, I had a chance to get a quick look at that, but as far as I could understand that other application, it was actually just adjacent to the Stranraer Conservation Area as opposed to being within it. I'm just wondering if that could be clarified. But apart from that, I'm not sure what relevance that. I'm not even sure that it actually requires to be there in the report, because we're going to start talking about precedents and planning applications, I suppose. But basically, paragraph 8, that it's refused on the grounds of its specific detailing design, I think is totally appropriate and in keeping with policies. I mean, they've kind of, the horse is bolted because they missed the kind of 2011 or 12 or whenever it was when you could do whatever you wanted. But I think in terms of conservation areas, that's a fair application of our planning policies, I feel. I would be in agreement with Councillor Geddes.
I kind of wonder if he did much consultation with the planning officer. Councillor McCoskey, you want to comment? An agreement clear? Sorry, Councillor Geddes?
Once, if we've disposed of that, sir, could I crave your indulgence and raise a general issue on the back of this particular application? And it is, I'm grateful to you, Chair, extremely grateful to you. But I had an approach from a constituent a wee while ago, saying, in fact, that in certain parts of Wigtonshire and settlements, you know, with conservation areas, in fact, some of them outstanding conservation areas, that there still is a tendency, as it were, for people to simply go ahead and put in windows of this type and not seek planning consent. Now, I don't know whether that's in ignorance of the regulations and the old, you know, the old saying, Chair, that ignorance of the law is no defence. I did ask in the particular instance the last time it was raised with me, well, are you referring to a specific property? Because if you are, give me details and I'll certainly take it up with the Council's Planning Authority. But I was told, no, I really don't want to get involved. It was the old story, of course, and I think as councillors, and Councillor McCaughey and you, without patronising you, you've served longer than most of us as councillors, you'll have probably met it more than the rest of us, that, you know, people want to bring it to your attention, but they really don't want to get involved, but they leave it to you, as I say. And I wonder, in fact, if these are isolated incidents or if it's a bit more prevalent than that. As I say, with your leave, sir, any comments that Robert might wish to make in that regard, I personally would find assistance, to be of assistance in the context that I've raised the issue.
Chair, it's certainly a line of work I'm not directly involved with at the moment following the restructuring of our department, but obviously would encourage any elected members and any member of the public to see windows replaced in a building within a conservation area. It now requires planning permission, has done since 2011 when the legislation was amended, so would encourage anyone to give us a phone and we can investigate it. It never used to be the case. It used to be you could replace your windows on an unlisted building if it was a dwelling house in a conservation area without needing permission, and we've seen the kind of effects of that. You've had a lot of UPVC windows undermining, in my view, conservation areas. But the legislation's been tightened up a bit, and it's a bit like maybe bolting the table door after the horse is gone. But the legislation has changed now, so it's a chance now to try and address these things and try and get some kind of pragmatic way of improving conservation. So yeah, I mean, if there's anything like that, the advice we would give would be for members of the public to phone us, let us know, and we can investigate it and get in touch with these people and ask them to make applications for it or get advice before they do anything. Definitely.
I've no compunction whatsoever in doing that, Chair. If you can get the address, but when it's raised with you and the question is, well, what property are you talking about? And I really, I think you should know, but I don't want to get involved. It gets a bit difficult. That's all I'll say. But I mean, if I understand Robert correctly, it's not a particularly prevalent or issue.
And you can say to them, look, your name will never be used, but if you give me the address, that's all I need, and still didn't seem to accept it. Okay, thanks. Claire, you want the decision, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm, the local review body have agreed to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the planning permission for installation of replacement windows and external door on front elevation of dwelling house at 12 Agnew Crescent, Stranraer.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you all very much.
Chair, I thought we'd disposed of the application before I raised the issue. I did. Forgive me.
You're all right. Thank you, gentlemen. No other. Oh, Councillor Thompson.
Yep, Chair. I wasn't sure if you were wanting to add a wee comment about the preamble at the start of the meeting, or if that's just something you're going to take up elsewhere.
I think the meeting's closed. It's just whether I suppose if we've got people sitting there, they